okay, so you believe this, but where did it come from? Did it come from Bible? In my thought process is that the Bible is a reflection of the pursuit of truth or spirituality that various people pursued, and they're trying to explain things in their own language and the way they were taught. And I think that's what we'll see.
Hello, smooth operators. This is Reddle's Pub Date Night with your hosts, Nate and Celeste.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to Reddle's Pub Date Night. I'm Nate, and this is my wife, Celeste, and we were talking about Pagan Christianity by Frank Viola. Or is it Viola?
I don't know.
Viola. Us rednecks, we make shit up as we go. So there'll be a link in the show notes below about it and kind of the history of how we came across it, and we're going to continue that conversation.
Before we do that, though, what are you drinking?
Oh, I'm still drinking the Refuge Bourbon Vanilla Honeycomb. Here's the empty bottle because I just finished it off. But you can get those in the Woodlands. There's a steakhouse called Refuge that we went there to eat, I don't know, 6 months ago
Maybe.
or so. And just for the steaks, for everybody who doesn't know, I'm carnivore, so all I eat is meat generally, except for today I'm eating some chocolate. But went there to eat a steak, and they offered some bourbon, and it was called True Love's First Kiss, which was probably the best bourbon I've had ever. And so I ended up buying a set of 3 different bottles, and it was so you had True Love's First Kiss, Texas Love, which is pecan, and marshmallow. True Love's First Kiss is I can't read, chocolate, butterscotch,
You know, if you don't want to use cheaters, you could just take a picture with your phone.
and coffee.
And blow the picture up.
Yeah, we're getting to that age where we gotta look at it close. And then the one I'm drinking now is Vanilla Honeycomb, which is vanilla and honey. So.
And then I am not a big drinker. I'm just fine with like Dr. Pepper Zero or Coke Zero. But I do like this banana pudding sipping cream. It is by Sugarland's Distillery, which I thought was in Sugarland, Texas. It's not. It's like Tennessee, maybe something like that.
Yeah, it's not Texas. We'll
So
forgive
it's
them.
actually really good. So I'm drinking 2 things in this episode. One is the sipping cream, and the other, which you probably can't see it, is raw milk. If you are local to the greater Huntsville or Lake Livingston area, there is a farm, and it's called Vincent Farms, and then they have a storefront called River V Growers. You don't buy the raw milk, but you do buy membership in a herd share where your monthly contribution helps take care of the animal, and so you get to pick up raw milk as a benefit of that. So shout out to Stephanie with River V Growers.
And it's good milk. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, because keep the cream in there, and so it's kind of thick and creamy.
Yeah,
It's really good.
It's really good. I don't do well with milk generally, but that milk's really good. I drink it probably too much.
And the reason why I got a glass of milk is because we have another cupcake by Scratch by Sarah, which we talked about in the last episode. And this one we talked about, we didn't eat it in the last episode, but this one is the one that's kind of like, it's got the cream filling. So if you are a Gen Xer, you know what a ding dong is.
And all the men are laughing right now, just because it doesn't matter if it's a cake or not. That's just funny shit. And you never outgrow it, just so you females
You really
understand.
don't. You really don't. I didn't have brothers growing up. I just had a sister. So, and my dad was very quiet, and he didn't really act up a lot. And I didn't realize that when I had a son, it just comes pre-programmed in y'all's DNA that farts are funny and all that kind of stuff. And I said, Nathan, when will he outgrow this? And Nathan said, he won't.
Yeah, no. And it's funny because we were watching something earlier, and it had a men, which do you choose? And it was a female, and then it was a stick that looked like a sword.
Female.
Yeah, but it was a stick that looked like a sword, and invariably it was a sword because it was kind of a cool looking stick that you picked up off the ground and had the guard and everything. I mean, it would have been great. Even now, I'm like, that's cool stuff.
You'll try your cupcake. It really is good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get a sugar rush.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not carnivore, but I don't eat a whole lot of carbs. That's really good.
Yeah, Sarah, that's awesome. I ate too much of that, I'm gonna be like floating around here.
Going straight to your head.
That with the alcohol.
Yep. Which, if you're not a stranger to Reddle's Pub, you already know how he gets with that.
All right, gotta do what you gotta do. I tend to loosen up a little bit when I got some alcohol on board.
Mm-hmm. And giggle like a girl.
I don't know.
Okay. So, I don't know if we'll get to all of it, but we're starting with chapters 1 and 2. It starts with kind of like the origin of pagan Christianity, which started with Constantine. Constantine, and I made myself some notes. I'm going to kind of go through point by point, and then Nate and I will discuss them as we have something to say about it. So Constantine created the first Christian church building. Before that, I mean, you can read their accounts in the New Testament, but they were going from house to house. There was no Christian church like what you think today. So he styled the church after the pagan basilica, which is I want to say it was Greek, maybe. The basilicas were Greek government buildings. And so he styled the church building to resemble that. And I mean, we're going to talk about all what that looked like. And like I said, before, it doesn't make it wrong or sin, but you need to know exactly where it comes from, especially when you are raised with terms like, this is the Lord's house. This is the sacred temple of God. Don't be running in the church. Be serious. Don't get up on this platform. Those kinds of things. So the first point is the basilicas had front-facing seating. They had an elevated platform with special seating for the bishop and the elders. Now, this is from pagan. There was an altar. There was a pulpit. The special seating for the bishop was larger than everybody else's seating, and in some cases actually resembled a throne. You want me to keep going? You had to wear special clothing to show your respect to the clergy, because that's what they did for Roman officials. They began the service with processional music. Say nothing? There were the pagan customs of liturgy, a sermon, clerical vestments, hierarchical leadership structure. Those were brought into the church. They were pulled straight out of pagan customs.
And keep going.
Okay. Stained glass. That was brought into the church.
Even the windows were pagan.
Oh, and I thought this was interesting. And then we've had this conversation too. Now this is per Plato. He put this in there as a nod to Plato, Plato, who told them, in order to elicit a sense of overwhelming splendor and worship, you need to focus on sound, color, and lighting within the building. Now, does that sound like manipulation of emotions? I mean, we just saw, and we didn't watch it, it's a documentary, but I know y'all have seen it, and I don't remember if it was on Prime or Netflix, but it was about Hillsong, and how, I can remember, especially right after leaving the UPC church, Hillsong was a really big thing. Their music, yeah. Shout to the Lord came out in 2000, and every church choir sang that song. They had such, they had these music videos that would come out, and there would just be this sense of worship and awe, and you could see people speaking in tongues, and people just in earnest with their hands lifted and their eyes lifted, and they were just worshiping God. But then it comes out recently that they actually found there is a formula, like a scientific formula, that at certain vibrations, if you have music at certain vibrations, you can actually create a song with the correct notes to elicit a desired response. So basically, this music and this song was designed to manipulate your emotions, and they would do it in order to, it's like a selling formula, and their music would sell out. It was on purpose. It's not like, let me just play this song for the Lord and it touched me, so let me buy this. It's a formula on purpose. And there you go, right back to the original Christian church building by Constantine. As Plato told them, you can elicit a sense of worship and overwhelming splendor if you can control the lighting, the color, and the sound within a church building.
And that's you look at, I've been in many different churches where they were designing a new church or redecorating, and it all came down to lighting and colors and understanding that this color elicits this response, and that's not including the musical side of that, where it's obvious that what we would call praise music was eliciting a response. It's not that the Lord entered the building, it's that you reached a certain level, a certain frequency within, and it affects you, and it's common. I mean, that's
it's no different than going to a football game and the music pumping you up, or a basketball game.
Yeah,
there's
the
certain
same thing.
cadence and certain and so then when you start finding these things, one of the things I've asked Nathan was, well, then if that's the case, was my response something that you targeted and withdrew from me, or was that a pure connection between me and God? Like, I'm thinking, I feel the Lord, and I'm responding to that, and then you read something like this, and you're like,
well, I think
you manipulated my emotions.
So you're going to open a door right here. So
Yep.
I think that all humans are drawn to certain music, types of music, whether it's rhythmic, the actual chords. I know there's a band called High Lung that's talk about paganism. I mean, it's straight up pagan, and it speaks to me in a way that religious music does not. And so here's the bigger question. You're asking if the music that you sensed or felt, the emotions you felt with music in the church, connected you to God, or was it an emotional response? I would say that probably that frequency allowed you to open up to connect to God. I tend to say that mystery that is, because I don't think there is God. I think God is what we create so that we can understand. And if that's the case, then every human is built with this effort to open themselves up to the wonder. I would call it the wonder that is, where it doesn't matter whether you're Christian or Buddhist or Islam or whatever, the music reaches you not because of emotion necessarily, or not even because God has resided upon you and caused you to do whatever. It's because it elicits a response to you, out of you physiologically, which means that response supersedes and transcends religions and music, which is why you can go to a rock concert, and if it's written in a certain way, it draws and it elicits a certain response. I went to a concert with my son last September, and frankly, the band that I didn't go to hear this band. The band I went to hear was Amon Amarth, and they started with this other band, or they were the front. They came on first, and then Ghost, a band called Ghost, which is anti-religious, obviously, and it's more specifically, they have an anti-pope, so they're anti-Catholic. But their music, if you watched people, their music elicited a response. So I would say that music transcends our understanding of deity.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think my point is that when it comes to religion and the use of that, when it's intentional, almost feels a little shady to me. It's like giving me a vaccine without informed consent. I feel like you need to at least say, look, we hope that this music encourages you to connect to a higher power. We're playing all the right notes in order to elicit a response from you. But you don't get that. You just get I'm spiritual, the church is spiritual.
Oh, well, yeah.
woo.
Where
There's a formula for this, and it goes all the way back to the very first church building.
Well, again, I would go back and say that what I say is along those same lines. It's just taking a different tact in that it's a physiological response. Therefore, it's been built into us over, in my opinion, generations upon generations upon generations. And that's the reason why there is a formula, is because it's built into us as a physiological thing.
But it's not about how we were taught that the reason why you feel this and experience this here in this building is because we have the truth.
Yeah.
And this is God pouring out his spirit on us because we have the truth.
Or Allah, or Buddha, or Krishna, or any of those. Because if it would logically it would stand to reason that if a certain rhythm or a certain musical frequency, whether that's chord progressions or whatever, affects us in a certain way, and maybe there's not one, maybe there's multiples, and it affects different people in different ways. So when I go to church, maybe that music doesn't affect me the way it affects you. Well, maybe that's because I'm descended from a different version of frequency than you. Anyway, all of that to say, all of it's based in paganism, really. And I don't have a problem with that. I'm not upset about that. There's some pagan stuff that I really enjoy reading and even implementing in my own life, which I just pissed some folks off, but that's okay. I don't care. It's there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with the practice as long as you understand where it came from and what its purpose is. And don't be fooled into saying, well, that's some holy shit right there, so I'm going to pay my taxes. I mean, there's some of that. And I say tithing. I said taxing. It's the same thing. I mean, why else would Constantine actually create a building that he could then control and then try to wipe out all other pagan influences? St. Patrick's Day, me and my brother talked about this in the main podcast. St. Patrick's Day was celebrated. But what it really was is St. Patrick went into the British Isles, whether it was Britain or Ireland, and actually murdered pagans. So a saint from the Catholic Church went and murdered pagans because the pagans weren't following the Catholic Church, which was based in paganism. But they couldn't allow another group of people to have the same thoughts as they did, because if you believe that the Pope is the only person, then you can pay your taxes or tithing to him or whatever the case may be. There's control there.
Okay, so here's a good one. The steeple.
Mm-hmm.
The steeple on a church building came from paganism.
What does it mean, though?
You tell me.
I know what it means.
I mean, and you find that even outside of religion. Look at is it the Washington Monument?
Yeah.
It's a phallic symbol.
It's a phallic symbol.
What's that mean?
And if I remember correctly, well, she's trying to get me. If I remember correctly, it's for fertility. It's a symbol. It's to be fertile. It's similar to worshiping Easter, or as you guys may understand, Easter, which was also symbolized by
fertility,
bunny rabbits,
bunnies, and eggs.
And eggs.
Nothing wrong with Easter egg hunting.
Nope,
just
not
understand.
a problem.
I mean, I do know some churches who preach against it because it's pagan. Just understand where your stuff comes from. Pews and balconies. Those came out. Okay. So even the layout of the stage. So you mentioned this a little bit maybe in the last episode. The layout of the stage and the audience, the way the church building is laid out inside, promotes the unbiblical division between clergy and laity.
Well, I mean, I remember being taught as a kid that the church, that the preacher and his family had to be set apart from the rest of the congregation and above. First off, because we were quote unquote examples of what Jesus was supposed to be. And secondarily, this military thing that came out probably in the 40s with World War II, where the belief is that familiarity breeds contempt. And so if you're too familiar, too common with the normal people, they can then look down on you as being not worthy to follow. And that's just military shit. That has nothing to do with leadership in general. Usually that allows you to not give a shit about the people that are following you. Because if you do, that means that you become commonplace, and that breeds contempt.
Okay.
Which has nothing to do with paganism.
So I have a couple of more points, and they are specifically related to the way the church is laid out inside, where you have the stage and the audience. Okay, we just talked about that. And I had never thought about this before. This encourages the congregation to assume a spectator role, and it conditions the congregation toward passivity.
Well, I mean, and we see that now even, no matter what religion you are. As if you're showing up in a building and there's one person that's the mouthpiece of God, whether it's, the rabbi in a Jewish church or the
priest
or
the
priest,
pope
or the pope or
pastor,
or even if you go to I can't remember what the Islam's version of pastor is, but it separates you aside from everyone else and gives you authority and power. And so that sort of thing psychologically allows you to be able to be over people, and not in a good way. Allows you to control, because then you have the quote-unquote authority, and God forbid you challenge anybody's authority.
This arrangement discourages worshipers from looking into the faces of each other. It creates a sit and soak form of worship, and he calls that pew potatoes. It emphasizes fellowship between God and his people via the pastor,
as opposed to directly to God.
Well, there's only one mediator between God and man, and that was the man Christ Jesus.
Note, man Christ Jesus.
See previous Reddles Pub episodes.
Yeah.
That's the end of my notes, and I see we still have 10 minutes left on this episode, so I can hit some highlights on chapter 3, or we can just talk about some other things along these same lines.
Well, I mean, if we go back to everyone faces the front, basically that I think that whether intentional or not, that psychologically allows people to sit back and take a passive role in whatever their spirituality is.
There's no discourse.
No. And I think that attributes to I don't want to say laziness, I don't want to be insulting, but passivity to pursue their own salvation with fear and trembling. And when you only hear the 5 or 6 scriptures all the time without actually pursuing what they actually mean, or try to do your own research into other religions even, or not even religions, just research things such as, one things that we've been stuck on here lately that we'll probably touch on in the future episodes, because I'm still just now getting into it, is the Sumerian tablets and the emerald tablets and these sorts of things, which were written hundreds of thousands of years ago, not 6,000, hundreds of thousands of years ago, that actually push. And in fact, I've got to come up with some of the exact stories, but some of the stories in the Sumerian tablets were ripped off from the Sumerian tablets and put into biblical text, not just Christian word for word. Some of them are word for word. Some of them are the concepts are moving in. So the question is, when it's the concepts, is for me the question would become, do the concepts supersede Christianity or Islam or whatever religion you want to be a part of? And I would say yes. Those tablets, which were written, like I said, hundreds, well, it's not hundreds, I think it's like 30,000 years ago, 20 to 30,000 years ago. And then to understand that these tablets seem to be that thread of commonality between all religions, and you start realizing that the words of Jesus don't mean what we've been taught that they mean. And I'll let you chase that down on your own. I mean, we'll probably talk about it in a future episode, but there's such a change in the way I see the words of Jesus and the idea of quote unquote God. I have a hard time with believing in the way we were raised to believe in God. Doesn't mean I'm an atheist, because I do believe there is a creator. There is something that exists that is
And he's not the old man
Yeah.
on the ceiling of the Sistine
Well, it's not even
Chapel
a
where
he.
he's pointing the finger down and touching.
No, it's not. It's none of that. It's more that the spark of divinity. Even Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you. He also said, these things that I do, and I'm kind of ad-libbing this a little bit, you're going to do greater things than the things that I do. And yet we hear that and we don't understand what he's saying. We think it's about speaking in tongues and casting out demons. That's what Jesus did. But we're supposed to be able to do greater things than those. What does that mean exactly? We'll probably go into that in a future episode. I'm not going to go into it now, just to bring up the question of, okay, so you believe this, but where did it come from? Did it come from Bible? In my thought process is that the Bible is a reflection of the pursuit of truth or spirituality that various people pursued, and they're trying to explain things in their own language and the way they were taught. And I think that's what we'll see. And so the pagan thing it's not a big deal to me. It doesn't surprise me that this stuff happens. The pagan thing is more like it doesn't surprise me, because I think that probably if I had to say anything specific, it would be that paganism it predates Judaism and Christianity by thousands of years. And so when you have that concept, then I would almost be willing to say, and this may be a little bit offensive, but that Christianity and even Judaism and some of these old religions, they're not old religions. They're actually the New Age religions. They're actually new religions. And we're having to reach past those things and shed the lights in the film that's over our eyes, put there by, quote unquote, the mouthpieces of God. And we can't see what reality is and what was truly written, and what did preachers or popes or rabbis or whatever, what did they take these scriptures that predated Bible and try to explain those things in a very probably legitimate way, yet they've been, as I said earlier, codified and made into hell, fire, and brimstone, or sin or not sin, when maybe they were just guides upon which we need to look at and try to ascend past our base self, which is why I think Paul said, I die daily. It wasn't that he repented daily. It's that he had to get his ego under control. He had to understand that this flesh that I have, this that you see right here, this is not who I am. The spirit that exists within me is who I am. This is just the incarnation of that spirit. And so if I don't keep this incarnation under control, it overwhelms the spirit. And so when I die daily, that means that my spirit is in control, not my ego or flesh, but not in the sense that Christianity believes it. Anyway, we'd have that conversation. And this is some of the stuff I've talked about in the original podcast, but we'll go a little bit more in depth into some of it in the future. I'm really interested in the Garden of Eden, what that actually stood for and what it meant, because believe it or not, that was from the Sumerian tablets and from the Emerald tablets, some of these ancient writings. And so when you start looking at that, you realize that what we've been taught to believe is not necessarily what is.
Or all that there is.
Or all that there is. There's so much out there that we tend to wrap up in a little box and say, this is the answer. But that's so easy to do. And go back to the paganism stuff, or the pagan and Christianity, people tend to sit back and just be passive participants. And so
this is why.
Yeah.
Because it's the structure. It's no different than, I remember when I was in, I believe it was junior high. I think I was in 7th grade, and we took a field trip to the Alley Theater in Houston, and we watched, I believe it was Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, that kind of thing. And the Alley Theater is like for live plays. It's not like a movie theater. And the church setup is no different. There's a stage. There's people on the stage. As the audience, you may react by laughing, but there is no discourse. So it's the same. It's like you're going to a live performance. and where you receive and you're passive and probably entertained, or maybe you're even bored. I have sat in services where I was just like, oh my God, and just watching the clock. Would you please hurry up?
Yeah.
You know?
I've been to churches where this is just the worst ever.
Right.
I learned absolutely nothing. And I get bored easy. And so if I'm not learning something, I tend to just tone out and go my own direction and do my own thing.
Had smartphones been a thing when we
Oh,
were in the
yeah, I'd have
church,
been in
you'd have been
trouble.
tick-tocking.
All the time. TikTok, reading, give me a Kindle book and I'm gone. I mean, it's just, but anyway, that's our episode 2. And, again, gonna go through this. Thanks, Sarah, for making the cupcakes. And
thank you, Stephanie, for the milk.
Yep. Awesome stuff. Anyway, thank you guys for listening, and hopefully you'll come back next time.